The 4-episode series begins with the immediate aftermath of the murder of a young girl in England. Her 13-year-old classmate is taken into police custody by armed police in what looks at first to be a terrible mistake. But all is not as it seems, and the message to all parents is this could happen to you or your children. The actor Stephen Graham, who also served as the show's executive producer, told our Christian Armenpour what he wants parents to take away from the series.
What this program did, and Hannah said this, my wife said, what she feels our program has achieved is for parents to be able to open that bedroom door now and talk to their children, be they male or female, and ask them what's going on. Let's just, look, you know yourself, when you go to a restaurant sometimes, and no disrespect, I understand it, but kids are sat there talk to each other, ask each other what's going on. That's the only way we can understand what's happening. Adolescence is such a difficult age. Your brain's forming, your chemicals are all over the place. You're learning about yourself. You're trying to construct this character that's going to take you into the future. So let's talk. Let's open the bridges of communication with each other. That's all we're trying to do.
Well, Adolescence has drawn such a strong reaction. The British Prime Minister raised the issue of radicalisation of teenagers in Parliament.
This violence carried out by young men influenced by what they see online is a real problem. It's abhorrent, and we have to tackle it. We are putting in specialist rape and sexual offences teams in every police force doing work on the 999 calls, but this is also a matter of culture that I think it's important that across the whole House we tackle this emerging and growing problem.
Well, Jackson Katz is the co-founder of the Mentors in Violence Prevention Program and urges men to speak up about misogyny. He's also the author of Every Man, Why Violence Against Women is a Men's Issue. He joins me now. Good to have you with us.
Good to be with you, Lynda. Thank you very much.
So full transparency, I haven't seen this show, but everyone seems to be talking about it. Why do you think it's hit a nerve?
Well, I think it's extremely well done televisual art. I think the storytelling is brilliant, but I think it's tapping into it's one of those examples where art is actually illuminating what's really happening in the society in a way that a lot of people can relate to. And I think it focuses on the family of the young boy who is accused of or charged with murdering a young girl, one of his classmates. And it takes you right inside of his world, if you will, and the family's world, and what happens as a result of I don't want to totally spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but it gives you an insight into some of the dynamics, both within families, but in the larger society. I think that's an important point. It's not just about insular look inside of a family as much as it is a look at the larger society through the lens of this family, because misogyny and online sort of misogyny and the manosphere and the influences in young boys and young men's lives that are, kind of pervasive in the English-speaking world. Andrew Tate, all the various sort of toxic influences that young men are consuming, especially in the online world, is all sort of there, not always foregrounded, but it's always in the backdrop, and that's what's causing, or at least an important part of the cause of this family's and this sad and tragic situation.
Yeah, I mean, as you kind of point out, the show highlights this worrying trend online, a group described as incels, which is involuntarily celibate. According to Wikipedia, incel is a term associated with a mostly online subculture of people who define themselves as unable to find a romantic or sexual partner despite desiring one, and who may blame, objectify, or denigrate women and girls as a result. And sometimes, obviously, they commit gender-based violence. Just to explain how this movement has evolved online and who is most at risk of being influenced by it.
Well, what used to be a small corner of the internet that was called the manosphere, which was a place where lots of men, including men who were really angry at feminism and feminists and the changes that were happening in the gender, culture of our societies, could find a connection with each other, and a lot of angry men in that space. But it's become much more mainstream in the last 10 years, and so what used to be a sort of a dark corner of the internet has become much more on the sort of the front page, if you will. And, let's be honest, Donald Trump is president of the United States. Andrew Tate is a global superstar who just came into the United States after being held by the Romanian officials for, allegations of rape and sex trafficking. And now he was, welcome into the United States and is being cheered at various, events. So we're talking about a mainstreaming of a really abusive kind of masculinity that, by the way, is a total disservice to young women and women in general, because it's normalizing a level of misogyny that is just unspeakable. But it's also really doing a disservice to young men and boys, many of whom want connection. They want intimacy, both with girls and with other boys and men, and with their families. But they're not getting intimacy. What they're getting is angry adult men who are basically exploiting their needs for their own personal, either political or economic gain. And I think we've reached a crisis. And I think this series, Adolescence, really speaks to that crisis in a very profoundly personal way, which it touches a lot of people personally because of the successful execution of the art.
Yeah, it really is frightening. And there are a lot of questions and debates about access to social media through smartphones for teens. We know that Australia is leading the way with a law that will soon come into effect, banning kids from using social media platforms if you're under the age of 16. And the writer of Adolescence has spoken about the fact that he hopes that a similar law might be enacted in Britain. But for teens already using these platforms, how can parents spot signs of radicalization and start a conversation?
Well, Lynda, the key point is starting the conversation. So I think the notion of protecting your kids, which is a responsibility of adults, and I'll speak even more directly to fathers, because I think this film has a very poignant message about a father's relationship with his son and his feelings of failure in failing to protect his son from these pernicious influences. I think historically, and I mean, not historically in a long view, but in recent decades, I think a lot of men, adult men, have kind of outsourced to women our responsibility to talk to boys and young men about issues relating to gender and sexuality and relationships and heterosexual relationships. And because I think again, a lot of adult men are uncomfortable with this conversation. And so if adult men are uncomfortable but we have a responsibility to boys and girls and others, but to boys, I think we need to get over, the adult men need to get over our own feelings of inadequacy or anxiety, and even, by the way, acknowledging to our sons, and I'm the father of a son, acknowledging to our sons that we don't have all the answers. You don't have to be an expert. If you're a father, if you're an adult man who's in a position of mentoring or with a young person, you don't have to be a father. You can also be an adult mentor to a boy or a young man. It's just, you don't have to pretend that you're an expert. You can say, look, I'm concerned about you. Let's have a conversation. And you can share some of your own struggles. Maybe it's not exactly generationally similar because of the technology has changed so much, but I think that's a valuable takeaway from this film, is that adult men in particular need better skills and courage often to break our silence. And by the way, not just in our relationships with our kids. I think this needs to happen in the public conversation. I'm glad to hear that Keir Starmer and other powerful, prominent men are talking about this publicly. We need more adult men in positions of influence, whether it's coaches, teachers, media celebrities, obviously political figures, but men who are in the public conversation. The more that they talk about the need to be vulnerable, to have honest conversations, to not have all the answers, but know that the level of misogyny in our societies is just unacceptable. And it's not fair that women carry the burden of being the ones, whether they're mothers or others, who are always relied upon to be the ones talking about this, bringing up the subject, initiating the conversations. If men would do that, and adult men, and take some of the pressure off of women, I think we'd have a much more productive conversation, both in our families, but also in the larger culture.
You make some great points there. Jackson Katz, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Lynda.
We're going to be right back in just a moment. Stay with us. You're watching CNN.